Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Ontario Building Code Updates Group C Retirement Homes webinar. My name is Lisa Tass, ORCA's Learning and Development Administrator, and I'll be your moderator today. Our presenter is Matteo Gilfillan, a consultant with Jensen Hughes and a code expert who has worked with ORCA over the past 3 years to help us achieve retirement home-specific building code. Before we get started, I'd like to review some quick webinar housekeeping tips. First and foremost, all lines will be muted during the presentation. This will help ensure the clarity of the presenter. To open and close your control panel, select the orange box with the little white arrow. The control panel automatically minimizes when it's not in use, so you're able to view the entire presentation without the obstruction of the control panel. It's important to note that if you're calling in using your phone, you must mute your computer microphone and speakers, otherwise the webinar audio will be distorted with feedback. If you're listening on your computer, you don't need to call in. In the handout section, you'll find a printable copy of this presentation, all the slides, along with any other relevant printable material. Once the webinar has concluded, a new window will pop up on your screen with an evaluation form. It's only 4 questions, and as we really value your member feedback, we hope you can take a few minutes to complete the evaluation form. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please use the questions panel. At the end of the webinar, we will be conducting a question period, and if you would like to participate at that time, we ask that you please use the raise hand button so that we can unmute your line. And now I'll hand it over to Matteo to start the presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the webinar. I hope everyone can hear me, and if you do have any issues with the audibility, please just identify as much in the chat box. As Lisa mentioned, if you can identify your questions throughout the process, but we'll be saving all the questions till the end of the presentation. So a little bit about myself. I've been working with ORCA since 2014 to affect this recent change to the building code to provide clarification as to the appropriate occupancy classification for retirement homes, as well as technical changes in the code to increase or improve the retirement home built form requirements. If we can just go to the next. Okay, so what we're going to be covering today is on your screen here. We're going to talk a bit about the code change process, the effective date and the rollout process relative to the upcoming changes, implementation as it relates to new projects, existing buildings, and projects that may currently be in design. We will have a discussion of high-level summary of changes as it relates to the upcoming building code regulation amendment. And we will briefly peruse a comparison table that was prepared for ORCA membership, touching on some of the high-level Part 3 requirements that are going to be coming into effect and showing a comparison to what the existing residential and care comparable requirements are. And then lastly, we will go through any questions. So, moving right along, there was a lot of thought that was put into why we needed to revisit this issue of what is a retirement home in the building code. And one of the major players was that what was introduced as a Group B Division 3 care major occupancy in the 1997 Ontario Building Code had a sort of specific senior housing model in mind. And over the years, two decades have passed, the model has changed. So we've evolved. Retirement homes have evolved, their operations and their services have evolved, and the same goes for other occupancies that were designated as care occupancies back in as early as 1997. One of the other reasons why this was such an important venture and why ORCA really took the reins on this was that throughout the industry in Ontario, there was a real inconsistency in the application of occupancy designation for retirement homes. So you can design a retirement home and take that exact model and build it in Burlington, and perhaps you can have the authorities accept it as a Group C residential, whereas if you move that same exact model into another jurisdiction, they may interpret it as a Group B Division 3 care major occupancy. This is also evidenced in the definition of retirement home in the Ontario Fire Code, even as it stands today, which recognizes that a retirement home can be either residential or care. So this led to a lot of strife in the industry between the authorities and their application of the code, and developers and builders and operators and their application of the code. So ORCA was looking to try to find a conclusive position that lands retirement homes into one occupancy classification. And lastly, the aim was to standardize and improve retirement home requirements in a responsible manner. So recognizing that retirement homes are not a run-of-the-mill residential, but neither are they a full care occupancy as originally envisioned back in 1997, they were looking for the sweet spot. And through the process that we begun in 2014, I think we got there. It took 3 years, which is, if any of you have ever gone through any negotiations with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, know that that is exceptionally fast. But it took 3 years, and our initial discussion started internally just to make sure that we were all on the same page as to the reasons why we were doing this and what our aim was and where we wanted to be. And from there, we started very early discussions with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing to let them know what our intentions were, and put our heads together as to how best to bring this to the table so that everyone can get their opportunity to provide their commentary. Ultimately, what that led to was a submission of a comprehensive package of proposed code changes, which then rolled into numerous stakeholder meetings to discuss those proposed code changes and massage them or tweak them as necessary to make sure that all interested parties had were able to support what was going to be proposed to the general public. And then ultimately, once the submission went out for public consultation, the ministry put together a technical advisory committee to review all of these proposed code changes, which I was a part of on behalf of ORCA. So as far as the code change package goes, it received royal assent not too long ago, and it will come into effect July 1st, 2007. And what this means is that all new retirement home code requirements will apply to projects for which a permit application was submitted to on or after July 1st. In other words, anything that was submitted for permit prior to, so June 30th or earlier, would still be subject to the code as it reads today. Now, that being said, having gone through a few of these transitional code changes in the past, there is an opportunity potentially to open up discussions with the authorities to see if there's any ability to use the new code on projects that might have been in present design or have already gone in for permit and potentially go as a revision of permit to apply some of these more preferable changes. Eligibility for the previous code application, by the way, is contingent upon having construction started within 6 months of receipt of permit. So if we go in for a permit July 2nd and we receive the permit approval by July 20th, say, then 6 months from July 20th, you have to have construction started to stay within the allowance of using the new code. Okay, so as far as implementation goes, new buildings are relatively straightforward. Again, any permit submission post July 1st, 2017 will see that these new OBC requirements, Ontario Building Code requirements, will apply. As far as projects that are currently in design or in process, the transition rules that we just went through will apply. Which means you're likely going to be subject to the previous code if permits have already been applied for. And there's an option to revise the design, as mentioned earlier, to the new requirements with discussion with the authorities. And conversely, there may be some opportunity to explore retaining the as read today requirements on projects that you have been working on diligently for the last little while. With this code kind of coming into effect as rapidly as it is, I would assume that the authorities will be open to retaining some of the older code provisions for projects that have been in design for some time now. As far as existing buildings go, there are new Part 11 renovation mechanics that were introduced as part of the Regulation 139/17 introduction. Those we will not be going through in any great detail today. However, they do exist, and if you have any questions or if you feel like you need some assistance with those, feel free to contact our office at Jensen Hughes. With existing buildings, there will likely be a trigger of a change of use if we're undergoing any extensive renovation. In a very similar vein, when the B3 occupancy classification came into effect in 1997, prior to that, the majority of retirement homes were being designed as residential. So as those facilities were renovated over the years, it was an opportunity for the authorities to trigger a change of use and or enforce a change of use, rather, to bring you up to the B3 standard if they interpreted that the facility was in fact B3 or operating as a B3. Another point to mention is that under the Fire Protection and Prevention Act, there is a trigger for fire services to invoke a change of use as well outside of renovations. And for those of you that are operators on the line right now, you may have actually lived through this, where again your facility may have been designed to a C residential, but when the fire services comes through to inspect your building, they feel that operationally you're more akin to a B3 care occupancy, and as such they will request that you go for a change of use and upgrade accordingly. So there may be some of that as well, though with the changes that have been implemented, a lot of the updating will inherently be in the design, or should inherently be in the design, I should say. Okay, so on to the meat and potatoes. As far as a high-level summary of changes goes. So one of the biggest changes is the introduction of 5 new construction articles to capture retirement homes as a specific occupancy classification. They're numbered 3.2.2.48A through E. And as a very brief summary, in the comparison table that was included as an attachment to this presentation, you'll have more detailed description of what these changes are, by the way. But just as a high-level summary, starting from the top, it would be an any height, any area building, fully sprinklered with 2-hour floors would be 32248A. Moving down from there, a retirement home, maximum 4 stories in building height, of combustible or non-combustible construction with an increased area and 2-hour floors would be 32248B. 32248C would also be 4 stories combustible or non-combustible, but 1-hour floors at a reduced area. D would be 3 stories non-combustible, 1-hour floors, and E would be a 3-story 45-minute fire-rated floors combustible option, all with varying maximum building area limits. In addition, and somewhat connected to, there's been some changes to the applicability of the residential sprinkler standard, otherwise known as NFPA 13R. NFPA 13R typically applies to residential occupancies up to and including 4 stories in building height. However, as part of the proposed changes, the limit for retirement homes has been set to 3 stories. So NFPA 13R can only be applied to Articles 32248D or E. So a 3-story non-combustible 1-hour floor facility, or a 3-story 45-minute floored combustible product. There was a lot of discussion that happened throughout the years about trying to get this bumped up to 4-story. However, there was significant, I don't want to say pushback, but concern from some of the other stakeholders as to a retirement home not being the same product as a traditional residential, which was what was always envisioned for the application of NFPA 13R. Another change that has come into play is the requirement for smoke alarms, or under certain circumstances, smoke detectors, to provide an audible and a visual signal to be sent to staff. The intention of this is to provide identification of the suite of fire origin to staff of the facilities so that they can evacuate appropriately. This is essentially in alignment with a B3 or B2 care and treatment occupancy criteria. All retirement homes going forward are required to have a fire alarm voice communication system regardless of height. So fire alarm voice communication is typically a feature that is introduced for high-rise buildings. However, through the discussions with the Ministry and the Office of the Fire Marshal and Toronto Fire Services, it was felt that voice communication would play a large role in the staff's ability to efficiently communicate evacuation criteria throughout the facility. So it was decided that voice comm would be provided throughout any retirement home. Enhanced fire compartmentalization of roof assembly and attic concealed spaces. This one is not necessarily a standalone change. This is actually embedded in the NFPA 13R requirements, or application of NFPA 13R rather, where to allow for the use of NFPA 13R in a 3-story combustible 45-minute floor fire separation facility, the zones that, and we haven't quite gotten there yet, it's the last bullet on this page, but the zone compartments that are now going to be required on retirement home floor areas will have to be built up to the underside of the roof sheathing, as opposed to the opportunity to build it up to, say, a fire-rated membrane of the roof assembly. Increased emergency power requirements include for a bump in emergency power duration from 30 minutes to 1 hour in a non-high-rise application, and under high-rise application there is no change. It remains at 2-hour emergency power duration. Zone compartmentalization was another major selling point in the discussion with the stakeholders. This you may have already implemented on some of the projects that you're working on as a result of trying to mitigate the impact of the vulnerable occupancy evacuation guideline criteria by allowing zone compartmentalization to offer an area of refuge and therefore the ability to horizontally evacuate portions of the floor area at a time. This will now become mandatory in all retirement homes. The fire separation for the zone separation itself will be 1 hour, or if the floors are permitted to be less, being 45 minutes, the zone separation can be 45 minutes. Flip to the next slide, you will see that this is essentially just the excerpt from the building code for the new retirement homes article 33411 in the code. In this, the zone separation criteria is outlined. So if you're familiar with zone separation criteria as it relates to hospitals or nursing homes, then you're going to be very familiar with this because it was essentially built off of that platform. So The zone separations have to occur at 1,000 square meter intervals on a floor area with a retirement home. The intention is that each side will be able to accommodate 1.5 square meters per resident, plus the occupancy of that side that's being used as an area of refuge. In addition, any doors within the zone separation will have to be weather stripped or otherwise designed to retard the passage of smoke. So again, this was pulled effectively from what is already in place for Group B Division 2 care and treatment facilities, namely hospitals and nursing homes. But there was a lot of benefit that was seen to introducing this detailed design into retirement homes as it relates to some of the feedback that came out of the implementation of the Vulnerable Occupancy Evacuation Guideline, or Staffing Levels Guideline. Continuing on with this article, a couple of other points that are raised in here include that the retirement homes are now allowed to have dead-end public corridors, where as care facilities in the past, no dead-end portions were permitted. So all retirement homes will now be permitted a dead-end public corridor condition of not more than 3 meters in length. For those retirement homes that were being built to a B3 standard, this will be seen as a boon. For those that were being built to a residential standard, this will be seen as a bit of a hamstring from the 6 meter length that is allowed in traditional residentials. Also introduced in this article is a requirement for all doors serving residents in a retirement home to have a clear doorway width of 860 millimeters. This is already a requirement for barrier-free purposes. However, this is a bit more far-reaching than what barrier-free would require, in that this will apply to washroom doors, walk-in closet doors, doors of that nature that may not have been envisioned to be along a barrier-free path of travel in the past. And I think we already mentioned that voice communication will now be applied in all retirement homes, irrespective of building height. So, okay, some other items that are worth mentioning. Those were the big ticket items, but some other items that are worth mentioning are that retirement homes from July 1st onward will be subject to the jurisdiction of Part 3 of the Building Code only. There will be no Part 9 option for retirement homes. So a lot of the changes that were implemented as part of Ontario Regulation 13917 are editorial changes to work out retirement home criteria from Part 9. As well, those editorial changes captured the new definition for retirement home, the defined term being replaced with what was being referenced in the code previously, and just general cleanup of the retirement home criteria and relocation as necessary to make these changes fit. Partition and locker construction restrictions in buildings required to be of non-combustible construction. Along with those criteria, the requirement for a continuous handrail on both sides of stairways and landings, maglock permissions, and the storage of oxygen containers are all requirements that presently exist in our building code, and for B3 and B2 occupancies that were just extended to retirement homes. And by and large, the thought process behind that was that it made sense given the occupants of the building. So continuous handrails with aged residents seemed to make sense to the stakeholders. The maglock permissions, which effectively are to allow for maglocks to drop on second stage alarm versus first stage alert in a two-stage fire alarm system, allowing a little bit of a delay in the release of the maglock, made sense for potential wanderers. Storage of oxygen containers is relatively straightforward. Just the presence of oxygen cylinders made that a reasonable request. And partition and locker construction restrictions effectively limit the ability to build any partitions or lockers out of combustible construction. And as mentioned previously, the editorial changes were aplenty in the new OREG 13917, just given that retirement homes were or specific retirement home requirements were kind of injected in periodically in what was a larger discussion point in the building code. So for your benefit, I was requested, or our office was requested rather, to create a comparison table of select building code part 3 requirements for to show the comparison of the new retirement home changes in relation to the existing Group C residential changes and the Group B3 care occupancy changes. That is available to you. Originally, it was going to get distributed to you ahead of the presentation, but it has been included as part of the presentation material that you can access as we speak. One thing to take away from the presentation, or the comparison table rather, is that it's not an all-inclusive list of all of the requirements in Part 3, and it doesn't address anything other than Part 3. But the intention of it is rather to be a summary of the significant, what is deemed to be the significant OBC changes related to the Group C retirement home occupancies. So this is just a sample of what the table looks like, but what we'll do then, maybe Lisa, is if we can pop up the table itself, and we can touch on a couple of the larger items for discussion. So up front here on this first page, just in case you can't read it, basically states again that this is meant to be a high-level summary and not an all-inclusive list. It defines, it indicates the definition of a retirement home going forward, which is to read that a retirement home is a building or part of a building that is a retirement home as defined in subsection 2(1) of the Retirement Homes Act 2010. And then following that, I've given the definition of retirement homes from the Retirement Homes Act. So it's a color-coded table. Blue indicates residential aligned requirements, green indicates care aligned requirements, and orange is a new retirement home requirement that does not presently exist in the code. So I think for the purposes of this webinar, we'll focus on the orange items, just to identify again that what is new versus what is existing. But before we get into those, we'll just skim through the high-level changes. So self-closing devices for suite entry doors and sleeping rooms has been aligned with Group C, as has pretty much all of the interior finish requirements of the code, that being flame shed ratings and smoke developed classifications for interior finishes. Just scrolling down on the next page, and for some of the subsequent pages, this is just an outline of the new 32248A through E construction articles. These were pulled verbatim from the 139/17 upcoming code. And again, high-level summary, just as application for these is we have options for 3-story combustible and non-combustible retirement homes, options for 4-story combustible, 4-story increased area combustible, and any height, any area non-combustible. And all retirement homes will be sprinkled. Yeah, just keep going past. So next would be the introduction of the requirement for smoke alarms or smoke detectors to send a signal to both an audible and visual signal to staff serving the suite, so that the suite containing the actuated device can be easily identified. That's a new requirement relative to retirement homes, though it's probably also fair to say that it's in alignment with care. So that can be either orange or green. Smoke alarms or smoke detectors within public corridors and within the sleeping rooms themselves are in alignment with residential, but again, the audibility component is more akin to the care aspect. NFPA 13R and its application is new to retirement homes, or unique to retirement homes. And just to reiterate, the application is limited to maximum 3-story retirement homes that are constructed or designed and constructed in accordance with either Article 32248D or new Article 32248E. And attached to the 32248E requirement is also the additional requirement to have the zone fire separations built or continuous up to the underside of the roof deck. The high-rise requirements didn't change. You will see that there is a change in the building code itself, but it's just to address retirement homes as a standalone element. But by and large, the 18-meter threshold remains intact. That is currently applied to residential. In terms of emergency power duration, we are going up from 30 minutes to 1 hour in non-high-rise applications, but we are remaining at 2 hours for high-rise applications. The clear width of a public corridor is aligned to be, or is in alignment with residential, which is max or minimum rather 1,100 millimeters in clear width. For care occupancies, 1,100 was also applicable where all residents were ambulatory, and a wider corridor width of 1,650, 1,650 millimeters was applied where we had non-ambulatory residents. This is seen as a win as well in that the idea of non-ambulatory versus ambulatory residents is somewhat subjective. There are supporting requirements in our code to help define ambulatory versus non-ambulatory, but they're relatively well hidden, and it's not uncommon to have authorities look for a 1,650 millimeter wide corridor in all care occupancies. Dead-end corridors, again, we've kind of taken a step in the right direction in terms of finding middle ground between residential and care. So the permission to have a 3-meter dead end it maintains the ability of the designer to provide a design that doesn't feel as institutional, while at the same time limiting the amount of dead end to cater to the residents expected in a retirement home. Suite entry doors and pretty much every other door that's serving residents in a retirement home will now be 860 millimeter clear. This, as far as suite entry doors goes, this is in alignment with residential, and with care, it would have been in alignment just from a barrier-free perspective. However, the determination of whether you have non-ambulatory residents would have potentially seen wider doors in care occupancy up to 1,050 millimeters. As far as exit and egress capacity goes, that has all been in alignment with residential. So this, from a space savings perspective, this is significant in that retirement homes will not be applying 18.4 millimeters per person exit capacity value. It will be either 6.1 millimeters per person for doors or ramps of a certain slope, or 9.2 or 8 millimeters per person for stairs and steeper sloped ramps. In terms of fire separations, the alignment is with residential, so all sleeping rooms / suites will be 1 hour fire separated from the remainder of the building. There was an introduction to, oh, sorry, bear with me. We seem to have lost a bit of our table there. Okay, so we'll repost it or resend it as necessary. but I'll continue on just to kind of touch on some of these remaining points. We reviewed Article 33411, which is the new retirement home specific article. In that, again, it carries criteria for the zone fire separation, the area limits for zone fire separation being 1,000 square meters, the requirement for the zones themselves to be able to accommodate the occupants of that zone as well as the occupants of the adjacent zone using a 1.5 square meter per person value. There are other requirements relative to the zones in terms of travel distance and its use as a horizontal exit that are also captured in 33411. The closures in these compartments having to be weather stripped or otherwise designed to inhibit smoke movement is captured here, and we've also picked up in this the dead-end corridor criteria, the requirement for voice communication for all retirement homes, and the minimum clear doorway widths for all doors serving residents in a retirement home being 860 millimeters. Moving on, vestibule criteria under OBC Article 3357 is aligned with the care occupancy criteria as it stands today. So irrespective of the building's height, we would require a vestibule between a storage garage and a retirement home floor. The fire zones, again, we've discussed. Those are new standalone items relative to retirement homes. Exit widths as a minimum have been in alignment with residential. So exit stairs, exit corridors, exit passageways, and exit ramps will all be a minimum 1,100 millimeters wide, as opposed to care requirements, which would see stairs and ramps requiring a 1,650 millimeter width. The vertical rise for stairs serving a retirement home have been aligned with residential. So unlike the care occupancy maximum vertical rise dimension of 2.4 meters, retirement homes will be permitted to have a maximum vertical rise of 3.7 meters between floors or landings. Continuous handrails on both sides of a stairway and a landing, except where interrupted by doorways or newel posts, is in alignment with care criteria, as is the requirements relative to electromagnetic locking devices being permitted to release on second stage alarm, and having doors from the stairway to the exterior being permitted to have both panic hardware and electromagnetic locking devices. There's been no change to the required elevator size requirements under Article 3541 of the Building Code, so that's typical for all three of the occupancies in question. Storage of oxygen containers has been extended to apply to retirement homes in addition to care and treatment occupancies. Sleeping areas in retirement homes will be in alignment with the requirements for residential as opposed to care. So there will be minimum area requirements for master bedrooms, secondary and tertiary bedrooms, both with and without built-in cabinets, as opposed to the care occupancy requirements, which call for no less than 4.7 square meters per person, and minimum dimensions both for headroom clearance as well as area. And surprisingly, if I may say so myself, there's been no change to the barrier-free accessibility requirements relative to retirement homes. So residential requirements for barrier-free will now apply to retirement homes, meaning that the 15% designated barrier-free residential suites will be applied to retirement homes, as opposed to the care occupancy where all suites would have been subject to barrier-free accessibility. And that's about it for the summary of the table. As I said previously, this doesn't capture everything, and definitely doesn't capture the editorials, but there are other technical changes that have occurred in the building code We've touched on a few in this presentation, but there are technical changes in Part 11 as well that will apply to existing buildings, which could be of interest to ORCA's membership as well going forward. In any event, that's the end of the presentation. If you do have any questions, we're going to go through them now, and if there's any questions that aren't being captured or that you think of after the presentation, by all means, feel free to contact us at Jensen Hughes. The contact information is on the last slide on the screen as it is, and I think from this point on, I'll take it over to Lisa, and she can start going through the questions.
Thanks, Matteo. There is one question so far, and it's, can you please review the fire voice communication? Is it for new construction only or all homes?
So all of the code requirements that we've been going through, including this voice communication requirement, is intended to apply to new construction, being a Part 3 requirement. Anything that goes in for permit on or after July 1st, 2017 will be subject to this voice communication requirement.
So if there's any other questions, please use the question box on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. We'll leave the lines open for another minute or so for any questions.
And here I came prepared to get completely bombarded with questions. I'm fairly surprised. Okay, well, as I said, our office's contact information is up on the screen, so feel free to reach out to us with any additional questions that you may have. And I thank you for your time today.
Thanks so much, Matteo. All right, everyone, have a great afternoon. This will be available by the end of the week online. Thank you very much.
Take care.